So the second edition of the college football playoff rankings are out. Georgia and Bama remain at the top. Michigan State made way for Ohio State, while Oregon moves up to third, undefeated Cincinnati. Still on the outside looking in, but they did move up from 6th to 5th. You can find a way to pave a way for the Bearcats to make it into the college football playoff as we welcome in Greg McElroy. McElroy, what did we learn last night from the second installment of the CFP rankings?
We learned two things, Matt. One, the committee's doing a thankless job, and I feel sorry for Gary Barta having to take and face the criticism that he is constantly taking, because putting any list 1 through 25 is almost impossible, and there's going to be things that are overlooked to me that are difficult to get beyond. And the fact that Michigan right now is ahead of Michigan State, that's the most egregious example of a mistake made by the committee. I know they talked about it, but there's no way a team that beat the team right in front of them just 10 days ago, by the way, there's no way that you could justify having Michigan ahead of Michigan State. That's the first takeaway. Second takeaway, they're listening to outside noise, because there's nothing that Cincinnati did last week to justify moving up in the rankings. But because there was a big groundswell of support for the Bearcats and people were very upset with them having a 6 next to their name last week after being undefeated, people were very much bothered by where the Bearcats were. They slide up this week, even though they looked less than impressive against Tulsa than they did even in the 2 previous weeks against lower level competition. So I think they're clearly listening to the outside noise, and they got it absolutely wrong with Michigan State.
Yeah, because that leads me to my second question. We can talk about Michigan State later. At some point, there's going to have to be a differentiating factor between the two, but it used to be an Oklahoma problem. We mentioned Cincinnati for the last 3 weeks. They haven't looked really impressive in wins, but now it's an Ohio State and Alabama problem with joining them with winning close. So is it time that the committee stops looking at how these teams are winning?
Close wins are not all created equal. Let's use Alabama as an example, because people are overreacting a little bit to the LSU performance. LSU is a better team, a more complete team than, say, a Tulane who's 1-8, or a Navy that's 2-7, or a Tulsa that's 3-6. If you play those teams close, that's a reflection on you, because you're playing to the level of the competition. I can't see what I saw from Cincinnati against Notre Dame. That's the expectation now. That's what I expect from Cincinnati week in and week out. And then I see them play down to the competition that is subpar. Playing LSU close is understandable. Playing against quality teams with good recruits, with good personnel, is totally understandable. But right now, Tulsa, Tulane, Navy, those are inexcusable performances from Cincinnati, and they need to ramp it up and really put together some style points down the stretch.
Yeah, McElroy, I'm with you. I think Cincinnati is a good story, and I know a lot of people say, well, they beat Notre Dame, that's one of the best wins of the season. I get it, but those 3 teams you just mentioned, those aren't quality football teams. And if you are, in fact, the top 4 team in the country, you need to be beating them 56-12 every week, which they haven't done. Finally, we look down the rankings. We focus on 1 through 7, but I want you to give me a team hovering around 8 through 12 who's not dead yet.
Well, I would say Oklahoma, man, because this is a team whose schedule is completely backloaded. They're coming off a bye week, and if we look at Oklahoma last year, it was a team that struggled early on. But come November, early December, and then eventually into their bowl game against Florida, this team was cooking with gas. And you can potentially make a case at this point. They have a quarterback in Caleb Williams whose best football's in front of him. Well, he's been outstanding so far in the little time that he's been under center as the starting quarterback, but he also is a very green player that's probably going to get more experience and probably get more confident as the season goes along. And then you look at what they have left. You got Oklahoma State. You got Baylor on the road. It was a tough game this week. They better be careful this week against a Baylor Bears team that lost last week, only slipped up 1 spot in the rankings. And, of course, they have Battle of Bedlam. So this is a team that potentially could run the table, have one of the strongest resumes after having a relatively weak resume up to this point. They could have a very strong resume come the middle of December, because if they beat these 3 teams and they beat one of these 3 teams twice in the Big 12 championship game, you won't be able to poke holes in Oklahoma's resume anymore.
And we saw Baylor's ranked. We know Oklahoma State ranked. That Iowa State game is going to be tricky. A backloaded schedule for Oklahoma. They might have to play one of them twice in the Big 12 championship. It's a round robin, which, by the way, the Sooners can clinch a spot in the Big 12 championship this week with a win against Baylor and an Iowa State loss at Texas Tech.